You do not get exhausted from people for the reasons you think you do. It is not because you hate conversation, not because you are antisocial, and not because you secretly think you are smarter than everyone else. It is because every time you walk into a room, your brain begins carrying 10 different realities at once. What people are saying, what they actually mean, what they are hiding, what they are feeling but refusing to admit, how the energy shifted after one sentence, why someone suddenly went quiet, why another person laughed too loudly, why tension entered the room before anybody noticed it. Most people experience conversations on the surface. You experience them underwater, and after years of doing that, something inside you changes. You begin craving solitude the way starving people crave food. Because when you are finally alone, your nervous system can unclench. No more decoding, no more translating yourself, no more pretending your mind is not moving faster than the room around you. And there are certain things you only do in that solitude that reveal something rare about the way your intelligence was shaped, not just by genetics, but by pain, by observation, by survival. The first is that you replay conversations long after everyone else has forgotten them. Sometimes hours later, sometimes years later, a single sentence keeps echoing in your head like a door that never fully closed, not because you are obsessed with the past, but because your mind searches for hidden meaning automatically. You remember the exact tone somebody used when they said your name, the pause before they answered, the smile that looked almost convincing, the way their eyes drifted away for half a second when they said they were fine, and your brain begins connecting dots quietly in the background. That is what people misunderstand about rare intelligence. It is not always loud, it is not always academic. Sometimes it is simply the terrifying ability to notice patterns most people miss. And if you learn this ability young, there is usually a reason. Children do not become hyper-aware without emotional necessity. Maybe your household taught you that moods could change without warning. Maybe love felt unstable. Maybe you learned early that the safest child in the room was the one who could predict emotional weather before the storm arrived. So your brain adapted. It became observant, careful, alert, a survival system disguised as maturity. And now, even as an adult, your mind still scans people the same way soldiers scan unfamiliar territory. Not because you want to judge them, because your nervous system was trained to protect you. That is why being alone feels strangely sacred to you. It is the only place where your mind is not on guard. The second thing you do is have conversations with people who are not there. Entire emotional dialogues unfolding in silence. You explain things nobody asked you to explain. You defend yourself against imaginary accusations. You imagine finally saying the perfect sentence that would make someone understand your pain completely. And afterward, you sit there in silence, wondering why emotions from fake conversations feel so real. But there is a reason for this too. Intelligent minds often rehearse vulnerability privately because real vulnerability once felt unsafe. Your brain would rather simulate connection than risk rejection unexpectedly. So you prepare. You mentally walk through every emotional outcome before anything even happens. You test possible futures in your head, like someone checking ice before stepping onto a frozen lake. People think overthinking is weakness. Sometimes it is intelligence mixed with unresolved fear, a mind trying desperately to prevent pain before it arrives. And nobody notices how exhausting that becomes, especially at night, because nighttime is dangerous for people like you. The distractions disappear, the noise stops, and suddenly your thoughts become louder than the world itself. That is when the third thing happens. You stare at ceilings for hours, not because you cannot sleep, because your brain finally has room to speak. You revisit memories differently than other people do, not just remembering events, reanalyzing them, reconstructing them emotionally. You suddenly understand why certain moments hurt more than they seemed to at the time, why certain people drained you, why some compliments always felt strangely heavy, why being misunderstood affects you more deeply than rejection itself. Because for you, misunderstanding feels like invisibility. And invisibility is lonely in a way few people understand, especially when you spend your entire life understanding everyone else. The fourth thing is something almost nobody sees. You feel things fully only in private. Around others you become composed, even during heartbreak, even during grief. You remain functional while quietly collapsing inside. People call you strong because they rarely see your emotional floods. They only see the dam. But intelligence often creates emotional restraint. You learn to analyze feelings instead of surrendering to them. You explain your sadness while experiencing it. You dissect your pain instead of simply holding it. Because somewhere along the way, emotions started feeling safer when turned into logic. If you could understand the wound, maybe you could control it. If you could intellectualize abandonment, maybe it would stop hurting. But emotions do not disappear just because they were explained beautifully. They wait quietly, and when you are alone, they finally return asking to be felt properly. That is why certain songs destroy you unexpectedly. Why random memories hit like waves when nobody else is around. Why sometimes you suddenly stop what you are doing and feel sadness you cannot even explain. Your body remembers things your conscious mind tried to organize neatly. And the strange part is, you often hide your deepest emotions behind humor, calmness, or insight. Because people are comfortable with your wisdom, not always your vulnerability. So you become the listener, the observer, the emotionally intelligent one everyone leans on. But very few people stop long enough to ask what happens when the person who carries everyone else finally becomes too heavy for themselves. And maybe you do not ask for help because you already know how most people respond. Half listening, quick advice, surface level comfort. So instead, you disappear into solitude again. Not because solitude feels amazing, but because disappointment feels worse. The fifth thing you do alone is create entire inner worlds nobody knows exist. Complex thoughts, philosophical questions, imaginary futures, versions of yourself that never got the chance to exist. Sometimes you think about how different your life would feel if someone had understood you earlier. If someone had noticed the sensitivity beneath your intelligence, instead of only praising your capability. Because capable children often become emotionally neglected adults. Everyone assumes they are fine because they function well. But functioning is not the same thing as feeling safe. And deep down, many intelligent people are not searching for admiration. They are searching for emotional rest. For one relationship where they do not have to explain every layer of themselves carefully. For one conversation that does not feel performative. For one moment where silence feels shared instead of lonely. That is why crowds can make you feel more isolated than empty rooms. Because loneliness is not the absence of people, it is the absence of resonance. And people with rare intelligence crave resonance more than attention. The sixth thing you do alone is slowly become your real self again. Not the edited version, not the socially acceptable version, the real one. Your face changes, your posture softens, your thoughts stop filtering themselves every few seconds. You speak differently when nobody is around. Maybe gentler, maybe deeper, maybe sadder. Because masking takes energy. Especially for people who became emotionally adaptable very young. You learned how to become what environments needed. Calm in chaos, funny in discomfort, mature in instability, understanding during other people's emotional storms. But eventually, constant adaptation creates exhaustion. You lose track of where performance ends and identity begins. And solitude becomes the place where you slowly remember who you actually are underneath survival. That is why alone time does not feel empty to you. It feels like recovery. Like taking armor off after carrying it too long. But there is a danger hidden inside this too. Because intelligent people sometimes romanticize isolation. They convince themselves nobody could truly understand them anyway. That connection is impossible. That being alone is easier. And for a while it is. Until the silence becomes too heavy. Until you realize self-protection can quietly become self-abandonment. Because your depth is not the problem. Your fear of emotional exposure is. There is a difference. A painful one. You are not difficult to love because your mind is complex. You became difficult to reach because somewhere in your life, being fully seen stopped feeling emotionally safe. So now you reveal yourself in fragments. Carefully, slowly. Testing people without them realizing they are being tested. Watching whether they stay gentle after seeing your flaws. Watching whether they listen beneath your words. But wounded intelligence often becomes hypervigilant intelligence. A mind constantly searching for proof that vulnerability will not end in regret. And then the seventh thing happens. You sit alone and try to understand yourself the same way you understand everyone else. You analyze your own reactions, your own sadness, your own patterns. You try to trace your loneliness back to its original wound. You wonder why your mind feels safest in silence, but also aches for connection at the same time. And eventually you realize something painful. Your intelligence spent years protecting you from people, but it also protected you from being fully known, and that is the heaviest realization of all. Not that the world failed to understand you, but that somewhere along the way you stopped letting it try. You are not broken, you are exhausted. There is a difference. Broken things cannot feel. Exhausted things feel everything, and carry it alone because they never learned that putting it down was allowed. Your sensitivity is not a flaw that survived despite your intelligence. It is the reason your intelligence runs so deep. You feel first, then you understand. That order is not weakness. It is how the most quietly powerful minds in the world have always worked. So stop waiting for someone extraordinary to finally see you. Start letting ordinary moments be enough. Start letting people be imperfect and still safe. Start letting yourself be known. Not perfectly, not completely, just honestly. Because the most dangerous thing about a mind like yours is not that it thinks too much. It is that it can spend an entire lifetime preparing to live and forget to actually do it. Your depth was never the problem. Your depth was always the gift. The only question that remains is whether you will finally let yourself receive it.